Welcome viewers to the CEC Gurukul lectures, and we are discussing American literature and American drama in my series. And in this today, I'll be discussing with you Thornton Wilder, the playwright whose dates are 1897 to 1975. Today's discussion would be about Thornton Wilder and his plays. He's in fact the playwright who has won a Pulitzer Prize for both drama and novel, and we'll discuss his work today as well, The Skin of Our Teeth more particularly. To begin, let's take a look at the life of Thornton Wilder, and then I'd want to also place him in the context, the American context and the American drama. So you see, he was a dramatist, novelist, actor, screenwriter, and also a professor. He was born in 1897, so he has seen much of the first half of the 20th century. And he begins to write very early on, and he was pretty sure of his path in literature very early on. So, he's there till about 1975. So think of this phase in America's life that he sees, the boom of the American dream, followed by the Great Depression, and then the world wars, the two world wars. So in a way, Thornton Wilder has been a kind of a distant observer to these events, and he has tried to encapsulate these historical events in his work in his own way. And therefore, in that, he's actually very different from other playwrights of the time. We have discussed Eugene O'Neill, for instance, Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, Clifford Odets within the American paradigm, and you will find that Thornton Wilder is in fact a kind of a very distinct sort of a playwright who doesn't really share any commonality as such with the other playwrights, but his vision is as strong, and his worldview is what brings these writers, these playwrights together. In fact, his aesthetics, his dramaturgy, in fact, is also very interesting in that, it experiments a lot with the performativity as well. So you will find very less of these realistic, concrete details in Thornton Wilder's works, and you would find that certain things are taken for granted. For instance, he would not use, if he has to show people in going in a car, then he'd just show these four people sitting on four stools and pretending that they are actually in a car and one of them is actually driving. So the idea that Thornton Wilder believed in was that reality or concrete objects on the stage pinned a particular drama or a particular happening and situation to its time and space, and in doing that he thought that it actually limits the meaning of that moment. And so he would give his in his instances, he would give, for instance, examples from Shakespeare, suggesting that in fact in a Shakespearean play you will seldom see any character sitting on a chair except for maybe the king, right? He says that everybody else is actually, they do all their acts standing. So, the idea that there is an object like a chair on the stage, he says it inhibits and it limits the scope of drama. So, in a way, and limits the scope of drama spatially but also temporally. So, he wanted to evolve a kind of drama that would not be inhibited by time and space. Now, at one level, this might actually appear very avant-garde, but also modernist in technique, because, he was trying to also reject the conventional drama, the realistic drama. So, and that is where we need to understand how to differentiate, how he's using this experimentation in drama to actually bring it closer to reality. Remember, even Tennessee Williams said in his, for instance, preface to the play, The Glass Menagerie, that you need to move away from reality in order to get closer to it. So, and Thornton Wilder is a senior playwright, really speaking, to Tennessee Williams. So, Thornton Wilder similarly believed that realistic drama of the 19th century, which he, at length talks about the middle class drama, he says that, it actually tries to steer clear of the difficult questions of life. and in fact focuses on drama that is melodramatic, that is sentimental, and that in a way soothes the audience, but doesn't really leave an impact, doesn't really create or create situations that are difficult, create problems that need to be overcome. In fact, it tries to hide these problems and bring melodrama into the fold of things. Even the comedies of the 19th century, according to Thornton Wilder, which is the middle class comedy, even that kind of comedy is one where you know that the target of irony or satire is never you. So according to him, the middle class of the 19th century and the drama of the 19th century, the kind of realistic tradition that it followed, it deliberately tried to undermine the very complexity of life, and it also in a way undermine the human potentialities. Now, he was one who believed in the deeper potentialities of human life, and that is also something that sets him apart from other playwrights of the time. While you see, this was, of course, a difficult period. The early 20th century was a difficult period for any playwright in America. And while you had writers like Arthur Miller and Tennessee Williams, who took to some kind of a tragic projections on stage, suggesting a sort of a helplessness, but also a sharp critique of the world, Thornton Wilder actually took the opposite direction. He did not go into the tragic or the morose or the melancholic. Rather, he tapped into the comic and went into the humorous tradition. He tried to deal with catastrophe through a kind of humor, through laughter, and this is the kind of tack that he takes, and therefore he's different from all the other playwrights of the time. And his main contention was that while we are caught in this crisis, of the Great Depression, and while we are caught in this and the world wars happen, there is a kind of a deeper potentiality in human beings that makes them, emerge from these crises, and that we have always done so in history, and so we will continue to do. Now, there is a very interesting idea that whether Thornton Wilder is actually, critiquing a kind of chronological time, because, you will find that his plays bring in a kind of anachronism. So is he critiquing historical time, or is he actually, focusing on this kind of historical moment or historical time? Now, both interpretations are actually possible in his plays. If you are going to take the modernist viewpoint, you might actually go ahead and say that he's probably the pioneer of the theatre of absurd, and that he has brought in history only to critique it, and he doesn't believe in any kind of progression of time, or he doesn't really believe in a kind of linear history, etc., and that he is in favor of a kind of timelessness. And yet you will find that, and I do believe that the latter is more true in the case of Wilder, that Wilder actually brings history at a more relatable level, but doesn't pin it down to any era or time, suggesting that there is a sort of a continuity, a kind of a historical continuum that goes on in life, where while we are unique human beings in our own rights, right? But we are all the time, we are all the time faced with challenges, and we overcome these challenges. So in a way, that that cycle of human life, of human species, that we see extinction, we are close to extinction, and then we are just about to save ourselves, and then in the moment we rebuild our life. So he seems to be underscoring this very idea of human life and human endeavor, that human beings in history have always worked to survive. They have always survived, and they've been able to build and rebuild societies based on their dreams and hopes. So there is a kind of a historical continuum that he keeps asserting in his works, and in that sense, you could say that he's actually not critiquing the idea of history, rather underscoring this idea of history where human beings are at the center of affairs. So therefore this particular playwright is actually open to interpretations. I think he doesn't have a set of ideology per se or propaganda, though he's very clear of his about his perspective and larger vision, and yet he doesn't fit in any sort of an ideological paradigm as much as you would want, because he can very easily be reinterpreted from the opposite point of view. So these are some of the things that we need to remember while we are dealing with Thornton Wilder, for instance. Now, if we go, I wanted to talk about Thornton Wilder's life a bit. So let's look back, to where he was born. So, of course, he is born in Wisconsin in USA. And he spent his early school years in Shanghai, where his father was a consul general. And the family later returned to California, and Wilder also studied at Yale, and he graduated from Yale. So for 6 years, he also taught English at the University of Chicago. Now, imagine here you have a dramatist who is an actor, who's writing plays. So he's a screenwriter also, because he worked with Hitchcock, to build a kind of a script for his movie. And he's also a novelist. In fact, his novels came in before he wrote before he went on to write plays. So he was very much a novelist who had published 3 novels before he actually came to writing plays. And he had also been able to bag a Pulitzer Prize for his novels, for one of his novels also. So you see, this is a kind of a creative person who's also testing, his skills at being a novelist and a dramatist at the same time, and also an actor. So this is the kind of versatile, person that we are meeting here. Now, very early on in life, Wilder actually chose the path of literature and experimented with the different forms within it. He joined the dramatic clubs and acted in plays in his teen years as well. He would often go with his mother to actually go and see plays. Later in his years at Yale, he also continued to act and review plays. So he reviewed also plays for the Boston Evening Transcript, and he was in the thick of then drama and dramaturgy, and therefore he was able to evolve his own aesthetic and his own theory around drama, which I've also discussed just now with you, and I will continue to talk about the experimentation in drama that he actually takes up in his works. Now, as I said that, very early in life he had moved to literature, but also very early in life, in his literary career, he offered a very sharp critique of this conventional melodrama and the superficial Broadway comedies that existed at the time. And I'd like to actually, quote from his preface. His dissatisfaction with the contemporary theatre is actually evident in the statement that he makes in his preface to this volume of plays, of his. And I'd like to quote from that preface and see what he says here about the kind of drama that has so far existed. He says, and I quote, I began to feel that the theatre was not only inadequate, it was evasive. It did not wish to draw upon its deeper potentialities. I found the word for it. It aimed to be soothing. The tragic had no heat. The comic had no bite. The social criticism failed to indict us with responsibility. I began to search for the point where the theatre had run off the track, where it had chosen and been permitted to become a minor and an inconsequential diversion. Unquote. To look back at this quote, what is really Thornton Wilder saying here, and what is his problem with theatre? You see, he begins with telling us that theatre is inadequate in the present time. In fact, he goes on to suggest in this preface that how theatre must, you believe in theatre when theatre puts up on stage an event where you feel, I know that I knew it. Right? That the fact that I always knew it, but I never knew it so well, or that I knew that it existed, but I never thought about it. So his idea is that we believe in theatre when we can relate to what happens on the stage, and we know that we actually knew it beforehand, and theatre has only helped us to see it in a better form and made us realize that we actually knew all this in our life. So suggesting that any play which we can't connect with, any play that tries to tell us what we already don't know, is actually deviating from reality. It is actually deviating from the truth. The truth is that the truth is always felt by us, but probably not expressed in concrete terms before us. And according to Thornton Wilder, the play, the theatre, actually works in a very good way to bring this up before us, what we have been thinking, what we already know in a passive way, but now is presented in a more concrete fashion before us. So his idea is that theatre, in the 19th century and at the turn of the century when he begins writing, he says that theatre was not just inadequate, it was also evasive. Now, why evasive? It was trying to neglect or deliberately trying to not focus on the deeper potentialities of life, of human life or human beings. That it did not wish to draw upon the deeper potentialities. It was being evasive. It was trying to get away from the questions of real life, and it was therefore inadequate. Inadequate in terms of its perspective, inadequate in terms of its projection, and the kind of realistic, concrete presentations, in fact, pinned it down to a particular place and time, and hindered the audience in a specific way where they felt that this was not their life which was being presented on the stage. And so he says that the word that he thinks that theatre for him was trying to aim at was trying to be soothing. Now, soothing within quotes, that it didn't try to ruffle feathers, it didn't try to make you question, it didn't make you uncomfortable, it didn't shock you, right? It actually wanted to be soothing. So melodrama and sentimental drama was trying to be soothing to people. And what is soothing is something that lulls your senses, right? What is soothing is also something that makes you stop thinking. Now, Thornton Wilder is very clear on the kind of drama that he wants to write. It's not going to be one that is going to soothe your senses, make you feel beautiful about life, give you pleasure of that sort. Rather, it's going to be one that is going to be shocking, and at the same time will leave you uncomfortable with whatever is going on in the stage. In fact, he's one of the first people before Bertolt Brecht to be able to use this kind of alienation effect. Characters suddenly break out from their mold and talk like actors, right? So it's very interesting how he's able to make and when we come to the discussion of the specific play, we will discuss how the characters actually, how this dramaturgy of Thornton Wilder helps him create this kind of shock effect and helps him create this kind of alienation where the audience is never in a state of half asleep, where the audience is always alert and is bewildered about what's happening on the stage. So in a way that keeps the audience alert and makes them participate in the actions that take place on the stage. So definitely it is not, his problem with theatre so far is that it is aimed to be very soothing, and that's something that he doesn't want to be. According to him, the tragic has had no heat in the present time. It's basically superficial drama that he's referring to. That drama so far, when we speak of tragedy, doesn't have that kind of intensity, for instance, that a Shakespearean drama had. So it lacks that kind of intensity that a tragedy should have. The comedy doesn't have that kind of bite. It remains again a kind of frigid drama in that sense. It leaves you cold. There is really no satire, which is the basic function of comedy and comic drama. So he says that the comic has no bite, and social criticism, the drama that thrives on the category of social criticism, it actually fails to indict the audience to take up responsibility. So the purpose of drama in that sense is defeated when the tragic is not intense enough and the comic is not satirical enough and has not been able to target any evil in society. The drama of social criticism has not helped us to take any kind of responsibility about the actions and about society that we live in. So this kind of drama, all the strains of drama for him had failed the people at the time. And Thornton Wilder believed that drama among all other forms. Now, we are also meeting somebody who's already a novelist, but he believed that drama among all other genres had the greatest kind of possibility of creating this kind of sense of responsibility among the people. It had it could convey to the audience better than any other form. And why did he think so? Because he thought that there was action that was constantly taking place on the stage. While there were characters were also actors, and there were layers within layers that could be explored in drama, and they could straightaway have an impact on the audience. So he felt, as a novelist and a dramatist, he felt that drama seemed to convey better and had a greater sort of potentiality in terms of reaching to the people and creating a sense of awareness among them. He also believed that individual action in drama, as it is showcased, becomes a sort of an idea and a type that can stay with the reader better or stay with the audience better, in the sense that action that takes place on the stage is not really a kind of a unique, limited action. That action very soon converts into an idea and becomes a kind of a general idea that stays in the mind of the reader, where the reader can connect with the world of the stage. It's not like a disconnected world that it's happening in a particular time or space. It is happening very much. That idea becomes the fact of a common factor between the world of the stage and the world of the audience. So he believed in this kind of commonality between these two worlds, when individual actions or individual situations and incidents could be elevated to the level of an idea, and that idea related with the audience. So that was his kind of stagecraft, if we could call it. And then when he goes on to talk about this idea of searching for a point, searching for a kind of theatre that he tried to search for the kind of theatre which was where how did it happen that drama actually went off track? How did it happen that it became inconsequential, and how did it become a minor art? Suggesting that an art that was of all importance in the Shakespearean time, for instance, and how did it become a minor art over a period of time? And he thought that this is because the middle class didn't want to talk about the difficult questions of life, and it made drama inconsequential, and it turned drama into a kind of a museum art, according to him. He said that it's a kind of a boxed museum that you enter. Drama ceases to be, it becomes inert, ceases to be full of life, and ceases to be dynamic in that sense. So that is his overall approach vis-a-vis traditional drama of the 19th century and the middle class drama that he talks about even at the turn of the century. So Wilder chose, in fact, while his contemporaries were moving to tragedy, and tragedy became the kind of a natural choice really during the Great Depression for writers, but Thornton actually took the comic mode up. He decided to use the comic vision, as the larger vision through which he would like to talk about human endeavor, human will to overcome the problems of life. So you find that he chose the comic mode to deal with the catastrophes of life, and his was actually a comic vision where human endurance, that's the key word in Thornton Wilder, that human endurance was actually underscored and was seen as essential in coping with the crises that society saw. And I'd actually like to take you to another quote of one of the critics who's actually written an introduction for Wilder's play, and the critic is John Lair. And John Lair, says that unlike Eugene O'Neill and Tennessee Williams, Thornton Wilder dealt in cohesion, not collapse. Unlike Arthur Miller and Clifford Odets, he didn't tilt directly at social problems. Instead, Wilder's themes were optimism, not pessimism, exhilaration, not alienation, compassion, not corruption, the spirit, not cynicism. Look at the kind of terminology that we already have. Look at the register where Wilder needs to be placed. So Wilder's themes are therefore, not one about people killing themselves, leaving them, tragedies of people. His themes are those of human beings overcoming the kind of issues that they face. And you see a kind of the Wilder's themes are those of optimism, where people are able to overcome crisis and they are able to go to the next phase of life. They are not, his vision is not pessimistic and not even cynical in that sense. You see, cynicism comes with the idea when you don't care about anything and you think that everything is a nonsense. So, critics who try to fit Wilder in the theme of, say, modernism, will have to also counter the idea that he was not a cynical person at all. He didn't believe that, well, life was meaningless and that there was nothing in life. He believed in human endeavor. He believed in human will and the kind of hope that kept human beings going on from one phase in life to another. So he actually believed in this vision of optimism and exhilaration, and he believed that compassion would see, and compassion obviously came from community life. You see, it was not, he didn't believe in this kind of individual selfish sort of life. He believed in compassion. He believed in community life. He believed that when individuals cease to look at themselves in the very notion of the I who's suffering, and if they look at human suffering in collectivity, that is when they will be able to overcome also the problems that society faces at the time. So he didn't want to focus on the alienation of the human subject, or who cannot connect with other people. He didn't want to think about corruption in the moral fiber of the time. He didn't want to think of the pessimism. He wanted to think of this kind of spiritual elevation. He wanted to focus on the optimism which is inherent in human beings. When faced with problems, human beings fight it out and they come out of the problems. It is in their nature. So it is to focus this aspect of human nature, and not the one which is where you move into the philosophical sort of a cynical view of life, that there is really nothing that can see you forward. So in all, Thornton Wilder's vision is based on this very idea of a kind of cohesive reality. It is a reality where human beings can move forward only in continuity and only in a community. And remember, this community is not just also the human community. For him, community stands for this kind of a cosmic community. He talks about this kind of cosmic oneness of which we are a part. So it's not that the human beings live only for themselves and unto themselves. There are animals, there are species, there are other things that move together in a sort of a kind of organic oneness. And that organic oneness is what gives force and optimism to his works. So I think this is where I'd like to close a kind of a general lecture on the larger vision of the playwright Thornton Wilder, as well as the kind of aesthetics of his stagecraft. We'll meet again in another lecture to discuss the specific text of Thornton Wilder, The Skin of Our Teeth, and we'll take the lecture forward from there. Thank you.